What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 3 running back start sits. So going through all 16 matchups, talking about every single fantasy relevant running back, and then listing them as either a start, fringe option, or a sit. The starts are going to be the guys you trust in your lineup, your running back ones, your running back twos. The fringe options, they're fine. They're not the best options, but they're certainly playable. More of your RB3s, your flex plays, and then sits. Obviously, guys you would prefer to keep on your bench. I do my start sits, and then later in the week, I go through and put out my positional rankings. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button. Any questions, drop them down below. Timestamps are going to be in the description. But let's just dive right into it here. Starting off with the Thursday night matchup, we have the Patriots taking on the Jets. And this is a pretty interesting matchup here because we saw both of these running back twos have pretty solid fantasy days in week 2. Antonio Gibson for the Patriots, and then Braylon Allen with a pretty monster day, getting like running back 2 snaps for the Jets. So I think those guys are interesting, but I think they're more of handcuffs at this point. Ramondre Stevenson and Breece Hall are still dominating the important touches. So even though these guys had solid games, I don't think they have upside right now of being like playable week to week. So Antonio Gibson, Braylon Allen, both going to be sits. For Ramondre Stevenson, super impressive start to the season. I think the Patriots offense has been better than expected, which has obviously helped him out. So Ramondre is a strong start, and then Breece Hall, you're firing him up as a high-end running back 1. And even though Braylon Allen stole some touches, it might not seem great. His usage was still overly strong. The opportunities were there. Braylon Allen's not going to be, ripping off 2 touchdowns every single game. Now, shifting over to Sunday, we have the Giants taking on the Browns. And starting off here with the Giants, I have Devin Singletary as a fringe option. I feel like if you drafted him, he's been solid, nearly hit 10 PPR points week 1, had 14 PPR points in week 2. The usage has been solid. He's definitely their clear-cut running back 1. You do have Tyrone Tracy working in on the goal line, which is not ideal, also on some third downs, but I still think Devin Singletary is the clear top dog there. It's just a tough matchup here against the Browns. So I feel like Singletary is more in like that running back 3 area, and then obviously going to be sitting Tyrone Tracy. Then for the Browns here, I have Jerome Ford as a fringe option. He's someone I talked about as a sell high after week 1. And based on the usage we saw in week 2, hopefully you were able to sell high on him because he went from having really strong usage in week 1 to not the best usage in week 2. He only had a 44% snap share, he had a 39% route participation, and he only took 7 of the 22 running back carries. We saw Deonta Foreman lead with 14 carries. Pierre Strong also got some work, played 10 snaps. So Ford was definitely the most effective guy. I wouldn't expect him to have like pretty much 33 or less than 33% of the carries heading into week 3, but the usage is questionable. He's still the receiving back, but definitely a little weary of playing him and more concerned than I was after week 1. So he's going to be a fringe option for me, sitting Deonta Foreman and Pierre Strong. I do think if this usage sticks, then Deonta Foreman might be the better option just based on the volume on the ground. But like I said, Ford was the more efficient option, so I don't think we can trust like Deonta Foreman being the lead back in terms of the carries. Now, the next matchup is going to be the Bears taking on the Colts, and DeAndre Swift is an interesting option this week because his usage was really strong in week 2, 65% snap share, 57% route participation. He took 14 of the 17 running back carries, and he saw 5 of the 7 running back targets. The problem is, not trying to mince words here, he just sucked, right? He averaged 2 yards per carry, or he's averaging 2 yards per carry through 2 games. He has the most rushing yards under expected out of all running backs this year, and I think he's at risk of losing work here. So that's like, I guess, some positives, some negatives. Another positive here, though, would be that the Colts have allowed back-to-back 150-yard rushers, first to Joe Mixon week 1, and then Josh Jacobs last week. So this is a solid matchup, but it's kind of like a battle of a team that has been really bad at running the ball versus a team that has not been able to stop the run. I'm not sure who wins out, but I do think the risk of Swift's role kind of lessening makes him more of a fringe option as like a higher end running back 3 play, even in a solid matchup, and then going to be sitting Khalil Herbert. Then looking at the Colts here, Jonathan Taylor didn't have great receiving usage towards the end of the game, but still being used pretty much as a workhorse. Obviously, you're going to fire him up as a start. Now, shifting over to the Texans Vikings matchup here. For the Texans, going to be assuming that Joe Mixon is good to go for this one, and if he is, he's obviously going to be a start. If Mixon with that injury, somehow misses time, it's kind of a crapshoot here because you have Dameon Pierce who missed week 2, you have Cam Akers who played but had a costly fumble, and then you have Daria Ungumba-Wale who seems more of like, a third down back, not going to be a workhorse, but someone who could also be in the mix. But hopefully we get Joe Mixon playing and we're good to roll. Then looking at the Vikings here, I have Aaron Jones as a start, Ty Chandler as a sit. We actually saw Ty Chandler have a pretty solid day on the ground. Aaron Jones wasn't quite as efficient, but Aaron Jones just has way more receiving upside on this offense. So in a matchup where they could be trailing against a very good Houston Texans team, I definitely think Aaron Jones is the better option here. But Ty Chandler, a very strong handcuff at this point. They clearly like him. He certainly has a role. The next matchup is going to be the Eagles taking on the Saints, and this one's pretty clear on both sides. Obviously, for the Eagles, you are firing up Saquon Barkley, and then for the Saints, you're obviously going to be firing up Alvin Kamara, who is having a monster start to the season, along with pretty much the rest of the entire Saints offense. The next one is going to be the Chargers taking on the Steelers. And for the Chargers, this has just been awesome to see out of J.K. Dobbins. Every time he's been on the field, he has been very productive. It's just been the injuries, and there was certainly no guarantee that he was going to come in here and look anything close to what we saw like pre-ACL, pre-torn Achilles. Injuries in pretty much back-to-back years like that could really just bury you. But J.K. Dobbins has been amazing through 2 weeks. Week 1, 10 carries for 135 yards and a touchdown. Week 2, 17 carries for 131 yards and a touchdown. He has by far the most rushing yards over expected out of any running back. So even though this is not a great matchup here, he has certainly established himself as, a must start here. And then sitting Gus Edwards, who honestly, has seen pretty similar usage. He has just been significantly less efficient than J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins has been amazing. Gus Edwards has been very poor. Then looking at the Steelers here, we did see a little bit of shakeup in their running back room, their usage. Najee did dominate the carries once again. He had 17 of the 28 running back carries, but, good to see Jaylen Warren had a much better role. Seems like the week 1 stuff was more to him being banged up, through training camp heading into that game. Jaylen Warren and Najee both had 31 snaps. Jaylen Warren saw 9 carries and 2 targets, so not great usage, but like I said, definitely an improvement from week 1. I think at this point you have to prefer Najee just based on the workload on the ground, but the floor and ceiling are still a little bit sketchy at this point. Like he's had 20 and 17 carries in week 1 and week 2, and he has not hit 9 PPR points, so obviously the touchdowns have not come. I have him as a fringe option, like a mid to high end RB3, and then Jaylen Warren is going to be a sit for me this week. We're going to have the Broncos taking on the Buccaneers, and for the Broncos here, we did have a little bit of a shakeup in usage. We saw Jaleel McLaughlin lead this team in both carries and targets in week 1. That was surprising. He didn't really do a ton with it. We saw a nice bounce back here from Javonte, at least in the usage department. In week 2, Javonte took 11 of the 15 running back carries. He took all 5 of the running back targets. The problem is he really didn't do much with it. Decent, receiving usage, but very inefficient on the ground. At this point, I don't really know how you trust a single person on this Broncos offense. They look so miserable. Courtland Sutton, I thought could have been interesting. Tough to play him. This running back room at this point, for me, I'm considering it pretty unplayable. Plus, the Bucs have a pretty solid run defense. And then for the Bucs here, I really like Bucky Irving either as a waiver wire pickup or a trade target. Rachaad White, once again, very, very inefficient. That's been the story of him as a rusher through 2 years, now through 2 weeks. It's, kind of carrying into year 3 here. So I still think Rachaad White is a solid start. He still has very strong usage, but I think we're going to see Bucky Irving, kind of consistently start to eat into his usage here. So here in week 3, I like Rachaad White as a start. I do not like Bucky Irving, but long term, I do think Bucky Irving has some juice within this offense. Then looking at the Packers-Titans matchup, for the Packers, they've just gone out and force-fed Josh Jacobs. Monster game. I don't think he got into the end zone, but 150 yards rushing. Great to see out of him. Hopefully we get Jordan Love back, kind of raises the ceiling of this whole offense, sitting Marshawn Lloyd. And then for the Titans, Tony Pollard had solid usage once again. Tajay Spears banged up. I think Tony Pollard's definitely the strong option here. So I like him as a strong start. Should be a running back 2 moving forward, unless Tajay Spears can actually kind of work his way into this backfield, which we have not seen through the first 2 weeks. Kind of a gross matchup here. Panthers taking on the Raiders. For the Panthers, I guess we have some optimism here with Andy Dalton taking over for Bryce Young. We're at least going to get the answer of is this just a complete dumpster fire offensively, or was a lot of this due to Bryce Young, or at least some of it? I still don't think you can trust any of these running backs here. Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders. Chuba does look like the running back 1, but it's still somewhat of a split. I'm going to need to see one of these dudes do something before I actually want to play them for fantasy. And then for the Raiders, Zamir White has undeniably been terrible through 2 weeks. He's looking like a very, very poor pick. But this is, if there was a time, it would be here in week 3. This looks like the dream matchup. It looks like the dream game script. The Raiders are 5.5-point favorites, which means this could be a spot where they get ahead early. They're trying to grind it out with a guy like Zamir White. And then you look at the Panthers. They gave up 219 rushing yards this week. They gave up 180 rushing yards in week 1. So everything is pointing to Zamir White being a solid option. The issue is that he's just not been good through 2 weeks. He's been very inefficient. He has zero receiving upside. The floor is low. The ceiling, I guess, could be high in this specific matchup. I have him as a fringe option. He's going to be like a high-end RB3. Maybe people think he should be a locked-in start based on the matchup, but I don't see how you look at what he's done over the past couple of weeks and really have like a significant amount of confidence. Like, this could be a great spot, but who knows? The Raiders could struggle. The game script might not play out. So Zamir White is a fringe option, Alexander Mattison as a sit. Then we have the Dolphins taking on the Seahawks. And for the Dolphins, not victory lap in Devon Achane. It's very early on in the season, but I got a lot of grief in my comments for being very high on him. He was my running back 5. I believe he was my 13th overall player. And I know the Tua injury is going to be a hit to him, but I mean, he looks like a great pick through the first 2 weeks. The concern with Devon Achane was like, the competition, Raheem Mostert, 32-year-old Raheem Mostert, and then, he's never going to get the usage. His workload is so small. And I thought he would increase his usage, but even I did not project that I'd be sitting there watching Devon Achane and I would be stressing over the number of carries he had or overall touches. Like, we're late in that game. He's getting up there, and I'm like, man, like, I didn't think I'd be sitting there, worried that he was getting too many opportunities, but that's what I was doing for that Thursday night game. So I love Devon Achane moving forward. He's a high-end running back 1. Like I said, the Tua injury does hurt him, but they're clearly not afraid to give this dude a large workload, and he's clearly their best option at the running back position. So love Achane. And then for the Seahawks here, I'll continue to monitor the Kenneth Walker injury. Right now, I would lean towards him probably missing another week. It seems like they want to be cautious with it. And without Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet didn't have the most efficient day, but he was the clear-cut workhorse. 96% snap share, 71% route participation. He took 14 carries, 5 targets. If Kenneth Walker misses this game, Zach Charbonnet is an absolute smash start. If Kenneth Walker is limited, then we'll have to, kind of reevaluate here. Or if he's good to go, you fire up Kenneth Walker. Looking at the Lions-Cardinals matchup, for the Lions, never too complicated here with these running backs. You fire up Jahmyr Gibbs, you fire up David Montgomery. Both these dudes have definitely been productive through the first 2 weeks. And then for the Cardinals, another pretty easy call. James Conner being used pretty much like the workhorse here. We did see Trey Benson get some run late in the game, but it was after they had kind of already blown out the Rams. So have to feel good about James Conner moving forward. Pretty fun matchup here between the Ravens and the Cowboys. For the Ravens, you're starting Derrick Henry. I'm not the biggest Derrick Henry guy. I think he's a nice sell high after week 2, but I still can acknowledge he's playable. It's just whether he's playable as like a running back 1 or a high-end to mid-tier RB2. Then looking at the Cowboys here, this still looks like a pretty solid split between Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott, and just in a not-so-great matchup, I don't think we can really trust either of these dudes. So they're both going to be sits for me. Even though the Ravens lost, they still looked good against the run with the Raiders. Now looking at the Niners taking on the Rams, this has just been really tough for the Rams here. They have just been nuked by injuries. And so starting off here with the 49ers, no surprise, obviously you're firing up Jordan Mason. And it seems like really the only potential running back competition he had was actually Debo. And now Debo is going to miss some time. So Jordan Mason, locked and loaded play moving forward. And then for the Rams, Kyren Williams has had really solid usage through the first couple of weeks. The problem is he just hasn't been overly efficient, still giving you solid fantasy production. I think like 14, 15 PPR points per game in the first 2 weeks. But it is concerning that, their top weapons are down. The offensive line is very, very banged up. And I do have some concerns that maybe they're going to want to see Blake Corum get in there, kind of mix it up a little bit. I still think Kyron's a very strong start, but just a little bit weary, especially in a not so great matchup. But obviously he does have that receiving upside also. Now we are going to have the Chiefs taking on the Falcons. And all of a sudden, this Chiefs running back room has got a little bit interesting here because unfortunately, Isaiah Pacheco is going to be out for the foreseeable future. So right now, it looks like their clear top 2 running backs are Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. In my opinion, it makes sense to me that Carson Steele would be the better option. I feel like he's the more direct replacement to Isaiah Pacheco, where he can take the early downs, He can get the goal line work. I mean, he even took 4 of the 8 goal line snaps last week in week 2, and some of those was when Isaiah Pacheco was still in the game. I think his skill set, like I said, is a little bit more similar compared to Samaje Perine, who's more of like that Jerick McKinnon role, the third down guy, the pass catcher. I do think Perine's going to see a little bit of a larger role, but if I had to side with one of these dudes, if I had to pick one of them up, it would be Carson Steele. And we even saw, like in week 2, Perine only played 9 of 65 snaps. He had 0 carries, 1 target. Carson Steele was at least involved on the ground. So Carson Steele is going to be a fringe option for me. I'm sitting Samaje Perine, but also a potential Kareem Hunt signing could potentially mess things up here and just turn it into a very, very gross committee. But right now, I would favor Carson Steele. Then for the Falcons, I mean, Bijan Robinson's a stud. You fire him up as a very strong start. Tyler Algier saw decent usage, but he's kind of just like the dude who comes in when Bijan needs a break. Bijan is obviously the guy you want to be playing there in that Falcons backfield. Now, moving over to the Jaguars Bills game here. For the Jaguars, I think you fire up Travis Etienne. It does seem like they're making a little bit more of an effort to limit his usage, whether it was Tank Bigsby week 1 or Dearness Johnson in week 2. But he's still a very strong play, receiving upside, getting the valuable touches. So Travis Etienne, obviously a start. Then for the Bills, we have James Cook coming off a monster week 2. You got to feel great throwing him into your lineup and then going to be sitting Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. Now we have the Commanders taking on the Bengals. And through the first couple of weeks, Brian Robinson has looked really good, pretty solid usage. They clearly like him moving forward as their running back 1. So he's going to be a nice start for me as an RB2 option. Then sitting Austin Eckler, who is involved as a pass catcher, just not enough of a weekly floor in terms of the rushing. And then for the Bengals here, I think Zach Moss is a great play moving forward as long as he can retain his usage. He dominated the opportunities over Chase Brown in week 2. He had an 80% snap share, a 63% route participation. He took 12 of these 16 running back carries, and then he also saw the only running back target. So Zach Moss, a smash start. At this point, Chase Brown can't be considered more than like a handcuff. He is going to be a sit. But that is going to wrap it up for every single week 3 running back matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button. I'll have my wide receivers coming out today, so stay tuned for those. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.